In Manhattan, where every square inch of real estate is a prized luxury, there once sat a 25-acre estate daring to defy the concrete jungle. Hi everyone, Ken here. Welcome to this house. In 1861, CKG Billings was born into a prominent New York family. His father relocated the family to Chicago after accepting the position of president at the People's Gaslight and Coke Company. Running a near monopoly on utilities in one of the world's largest cities was incredibly lucrative, so it was no surprise that when CKG graduated from college, his father opened the company door for him. In 1887, as his father retired, CKG took his place as president. When he took control of the company, he aggressively acquired the other 12 smaller energy companies servicing the greater Chicago area and merged them into his company. At this point, in 1901, the company profits were at a record high, and CKG decided to cash in. Retiring as president while holding a controlling interest in the company, he chose to take a seat on the board so he could sit back and collect cash with ease. Now retired at the age of 40, CKG was able to pursue his hobbies. He had long been an avid sportsman and had helped to found various athletic clubs. He could now focus all of his time on sports, especially trotting, in which he had won several trophies and ribbons. Being an outdoorsman, he began searching for an equestrian property, and to his family's surprise, he thought Manhattan would be the perfect place to move to. At this time, Manhattan wasn't exactly known for its rolling pastures and nature trails. It was the metropolitan heart of America's largest city, a place where the wealthiest barons of industry spent unimaginable sums of money to build mansions with shared walls and no yards. He purchased a city mansion, blending in with high society. Then, he purchased 25 undevelopable acres along the Hudson River in Washington Heights. The site, which was formerly Fort Tryon, consisted of steep, choppy cliffs 250 feet above sea level, one of the highest points on the island. CKG then hired architect Guy Lowell and landscape architect Charles Downing Lay to design for him a grand equestrian estate. After 2 long years of regrading the terrain and slow, tedious construction, the first phase of the estate was complete. In 1903, the 25,000 square foot stable complex was finished. Sources vary on the exact number, but most agree that there were between 60 and 75 stalls for horses inside. There were also a few bedrooms and a large casino where CKG could entertain his friends. To celebrate this monumental achievement, he sent out invitations to a dinner party. It was leaked to the press that guests would be required to sit on hobby horses all night and that the entire dinner would become quite the spectacle. As journalists began gathering outside of the front gate, CKG had his party relocated to Sherry's restaurant in town. The restaurant's 4th floor ballroom was filled with hay, and all 36 guests were required to remain seated atop rented horses while dinner was served. News quickly spread about Manhattan's newest, most eccentric millionaire, but CKG was just getting started. While the architects were busy overseeing the next phase of his estate, CKG commissioned the Vanadis, a 232-foot steam yacht, to keep docked in the Hudson at the foot of his property. Finally, after 5 long years of construction, the cliff had been transformed into a gentle hill, and sitting atop it in the center was a fortress constructed from solid granite blocks. The 25,000 square foot mansion had been designed in the Chateauesque style and faced in limestone. As we rotate about the mansion, we will notice a tower rising 80 feet into the air. The views from the top were said to be unobstructed, and while it was far from the tallest building, it rivaled the tallest skyscrapers of the time in height above sea level. The driveway alone took more than 100 men a full year to construct, carving out the granite cliffs and reusing the stone to build retaining walls, including the grand arcade which was dubbed the Roman roadway. Inside, the entire mansion was planned for entertainment, with the fountain room echoing the owner's eccentricities. While waiting for CKG to show us around, we would first take a seat in the reception room, where a full-time musician would play only the current hits on the piano. Next, we will make our way into the living room, clad in rich wood paneling. As we look around, we will find antiques from dozens of countries, and at this point, we might start to believe that CKG is sophisticated, unlike the words we've read about him in the newspapers. But then we hear him hollering for us as he splashes around in the indoor pool, discarding the rigid social standards of the time. As we hear pins crashing in the bowling alley, we start to realize that Tryon Hall is perhaps the most lavish man cave in existence. Though, not all of the rooms could be so fun. Mrs. Billings ensured that the mansion had a proper dining room for formal dinners. Though, the breakfast room, offering panoramic views of New York from the tower, was where CKG chose to bring most of his friends for shared meals. Mrs. Billings, who had the same dining set reproduced, chose to eat her informal meals in the conservatory. While we're here, we can peek our heads outside to see the swimming pool carved into the bluff itself and overflowing with water into the terrace gardens below. There are no known photos of the stair hall, so let's resume our tour from the second floor stair landing, which has been staged as the library. From here we can make our way into the billiards room, where CKG's trotting trophies are on full display. Nearby, we will find the Billings bedroom, where, as was customary for the time, they each had their own separate beds. Tryon Hall became the center of New York's social scene amongst the athletic men of high society. What was meant to be a family mansion quickly turned into a boys' club, with Mrs. Billings choosing to spend much of her time at their other properties. By 1917, CKG had had his fun and grew bored of the property. He purchased a 21-room apartment in town and set out to build multiple estates all around the country, but that's a story for another time. Meanwhile, John D. Rockefeller Jr. was building his legacy and was enticed by the opportunity to purchase Tryon Hall. Not only did he buy the Billings mansion, he purchased 2 adjoining estates and merged the land together in the hopes of founding a park. Unfortunately, John Jr. did not have the pull he thought he did in the city, and it was nearly impossible to get the local government on board with the creation of a new park. Nevertheless, he held on to the properties, renting out the house to an acquaintance while he waited for a decision from the city. After 9 years had passed, and while his tenant was still renting the mansion, it caught on fire. According to the various newspapers of the time, this disaster was of epic proportions. Not only were the hydrants too far away from the house, but the hoses were not long enough to get within 50 feet of its walls. Firemen had to race down to the river to fetch water in tanks and bring it all the way up the drive. And while the tenants escaped unharmed, there were reports of a dog trapped in the tower. According to the Times, the dog leapt from the second floor into the flower bed, and while it was scared, it survived uninjured. Just after that, the tower collapsed in on itself, causing a pillar of fire to rocket into the sky, which could be seen from miles away. By the next morning, though the fire was under control, the mansion and everything inside of it had been reduced to ash. Among the most grieved incinerated items were 2 paintings by Rembrandt, a handful of European tapestries, and the plans to one day turn the house into a New York history museum. By the following year, Rockefeller had cleaned up the mess and reorganized the grounds with the aid of Frederick Law Olmsted Jr. Finally, with a finished park, the city was ready to accept Rockefeller's donation. While the mansion no longer exists, you can still find bits and pieces of the estate scattered about Fort Tryon Park, blending into the scenery, reminders of what came before. Which part of the house was your favorite? Let me know down below in the comment section. And while you're there, make sure to hit that subscribe button so you never miss an exciting episode of This House.